So let me stop sharing here. Okay. So again, good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce Humberto. I've known him for a really long time, just kind of following his talks, and we seen him in many conferences. He's friends with some of my very good friends, so we were introduced in that way. But a little bit about him. He is a professor of metaphysics and history of modern philosophy at the Federal University of Juiz de Fora in Minas Gerais, Brazil. He's member of the Brazilian Academy of Philosophy. He's author of books and articles on philosophy of religion, the science-religion debate, and philosophy of culture. Actually, I had on the slides a few of his books. He has published a number of books in Portuguese. He has some books in English as well. And to be very honest, to prepare for this conversation with this man, I watched some of his lectures, and I was a little intimidated by his mind. So I'm being very honest. And I was like, wow, can I even have a conversation with this person? So, okay. But Humberto, thank you. Would you like just to say a few words to begin?
Well, thank you for the invitation and greetings to everyone in the audience. I'm very proud, very honored to be invited to talk to you.
Okay. All right. So our conversation today is going to be around God. So we chose a very easy topic to talk about today. And so when I think about God, I think about this, how unreachable it feels, right? How far, how difficult. And I was reflecting a little bit about it, and I was reflecting, with Kardec when we look at the very first question of the Spirit's book. And Kardec asked, what is God? And in the French and the Portuguese language, we could use a pronoun to say, for example, o que é Deus, right? So this pronoun defines, is a definitive pronoun, but when Kardec asked the question, there is no pronoun, there is nothing that can actually define this thing. Yet, we are constantly in the search for God, whether we are aware of that or not. And the best image that comes to my mind is the image of the plant, the little plant, that no matter where you put that little plant, it will turn towards the light. It will seek the light. And I think that Jesus really portrayed the meaning of life and our necessity of God when he shared with us the parable of the prodigal son. In the parable of the prodigal son, he talks about the history of each one of us on our way back in this journey, seeking to reconnect with the source, with the beginning, with the first cause. So it seems so, and we talk a little bit via WhatsApp, it's almost a contradiction, not necessarily one, but it feels like it, that we are moved towards God, and yet God is this so undefined thing. So I would like to pass that on to you, and maybe we can begin just by elaborating a little bit on that. So when we think about God, and if God is indeed, we instinctively seeking for God, where do we begin?
Excellent point. Well, God is an extremely complex and deep concept, and we should not pretend to exhaust it in any conversation. It is, by definition, something unlimited and beyond the reach of our understanding. But it doesn't mean, as any other metaphysical issue, that we cannot conceive it or tackle the problem just a little bit humbly at the best of our capacity. As we cannot define freedom, for example. What is freedom? It's not a thing. It's metaphysical. We never have, we will never have the experience of freedom. We will never have the experience of justice. These are pure ideas that completely transcend our material or physical experience. Now, we are quite familiar with these ideas, and actually, we live by these ideas. So, without the idea of justice, freedom, peace, or equality, it would be very hard to live at all, to form a society, to step out of our houses every day and face the world, because we would not have these transcendent references that guide us in life. So the concept of God is quite in a similar situation. It is not completely unknown, but it is relatively unknown and relatively outside the grasp of our human understanding, our finite understanding. But we can have a sense of it, and this small glimpse or this small sense that we have about God completely change us and turn us into new, most of the times, much better people. And if not, I would argue that it is mostly caused by very bad conceptions or misconceptions of what God should be. And you started with a very interesting observation about how Allan Kardec tried to address the subject by separating his French expression with the common Portuguese translation that kind of objectifies God, trying to put in God the characteristic of a thing. Obviously, it's not the intention of the translation either, but one of the cleverest moves in the history of philosophy and religion was made by the British when they realized that most of the mystics, the mystical tradition, that is the tradition of direct experience with God, equates God with nothing. Because in English, nothing means no thing.
Interesting.
So it is not a thing, it is not an object, it is not restricted or determined as a finite being or entity. It is everything, it is everywhere. It is the context of the universe and the context of our lives. That's why we use very clever metaphors for the description of God or to describe God's attributes, such as intelligence, order, love, peace, sovereign will, or omnipotence, omnipresent, and so on, so on, so. Now, we don't quite know if God actually has these characteristics or if God is correspondent to these characteristics, because again and again, this is human conception. So humans trying to conceive, to conceptualize something that is higher, of a higher order than our minds and our understanding and our spirits. But they are beautiful concepts nevertheless. And I made a small list. You used in your prayer, Suzana, the word clarity. Now, medievals and some of the modern theologians and mystics would use the word also lucidity to represent one of the most important characteristics that God can convey to us and to our minds and to our consciousness. It is a sort of center of the soul that gives us lucidity. And that's one of the many words that the Buddhist or whoever person from any other completely different perspective would completely accept. Buddhists are normally atheists, or they conceive themselves usually, not always, but usually as atheists, but only because they have in mind very traditional concepts of God that are figures or things or entities. And then they say, no, that's not it. This is another image of your mind. Mm-hmm. Now we are talking about this absolute condition that is the nature of reality. But when they say in their own terms what is the divine, what is the Buddha nature, most Christian or Muslim or Jewish mystics and philosophers would also agree with them. Yeah, that's it. That's what we call God. Now, the traditional representation is like an entity, almost like a person. But the metaphysical representation and the feeling and the experiences that mystics such as Francis of Assisi or Mother Teresa of Avila, the Teresa of Avila, these direct experiences, they are without bound, without form, without figure, without representation. And then they use metaphors that are quite expansive. It's a notion of love. Mm-hmm. It's goodness everywhere, in everyone, in everything. Oh no, wait, come on. Everything and everyone, it's unacceptable, because I can relate some things that I know and some people that I know with the divine. And that's our problem. So I would like to spend maybe most of the time today talking about this problem. Why we cannot conceive everything as sacred and divine. And thus we limit God to the range of things that we understand, that we like, and that we accept.
Yes. Go ahead.
So another amazing word is order. And not order from the outside, order imposed by an authority, because there is something that God definitely is ultra liberal. Nothing is imposed. We can do whatever we want. Mm-hmm. Now, I can do literally whatever I want, and anyone, despite maybe evil and misguided, mm-hmm. everyone can do whatever one wants. There's nothing limiting us. Our limitations come from ourselves, our misconceptions, and they come from the limits of reality itself. There is no wall preventing me from doing anything or wishing or thinking anything. But some things will not react as swiftly or as positively as I would like. For example, I can change everything that is in my inner circle, in my heart, for example. Mm-hmm. I can change everything in my heart. I can change everything in my mind. But if I want to change other people or physical reality, I will realize that my capacity to change these other beings is limited to my power to affect them. I can affect matter through energy, using a tool, for example, using fuel to boost my physical capacity with a car, for example. I can be much faster than I could walk. But I can also affect people by being sympathetic, by developing the capacity to talk better or to understand better what people really think and how they really conceive things and correlate their actions with what they are thinking. Now, these different tools will give the power and the capacity to affect outside reality more, but we will never master outside reality because other beings, objects, and people, they are also independent. So I'm not God. And that can be very frustrating for some people to realize they're not God and that they do not have complete power over other people and other objects. That's something very humbling to us human beings. And we have to adapt to this reality and to understand that there is an order, but this order is not authoritarian and it is not imposed on us. It's just the way the things are and just the way that the structure of the universe is. So the best way to address this face of God, this side of God, is through science, through scientific investigation, chemistry, biology, psychology, sociology, physics, medicine. We are learning how the structure of the world works. And sometimes the structure can be bent to one direction or the other, but it has limits. And learning the limits of reality is also learning something about this, so to say, mind, this universal mind that structures everything as it is, not as an authority, but as the logical ground from which things emerge and exist in harmony, in the way they exist independently.
Can I interject just a little bit? I have a few thoughts that resonate very deeply with me from what you said, some ideas and some feelings. So in the realm of ideas, I love the definition of God as nothing. That was very interesting. I feel, as I'm hearing you, I feel my mind expanding, literally. It's like broadening my view and my understanding of things. And I think that is the human trajectory towards God. It will take, and it takes every day, our ability to think abstractly. So when we go back in the beginning of our evolution, we could just think about what we were seeing, the present moment. There was no thinking necessarily of the future. All the thinking was around, how do I survive today? And as we evolve, then we start the evolution of abstract thinking and moral concepts and concepts, like you said, of freedom, peace, thinking about those things and abstracting. And the more we evolve and the more our capacity to do that evolves, the more we're going to grasp the concept, whatever that concept is. Also came to my mind the answer that the spirits give to Kardec being the supreme intelligence. So intelligence in the answer is a noun. He will define the spirits in question 76 as intelligent principle. So in that answer, the word intelligent is an adjective. So God being the noun, and we created by God having the characteristic. So it's an adjective. We are intelligent beings, but God is the supreme intelligence. So God is the noun, and to be supreme, it has to encompass everything that you talk about. And I think for me personally, you don't know a lot about me, but I have two teenagers in my house at this moment. And so the idea, everything that you were talking about philosophically, about understanding that there are limits to what we can do, and especially when it relates to someone else's life, you have no idea how deep that goes into my soul at this moment. So I just like to kind of, add some of these thoughts that I was having while you were talking. I hope I didn't derail you because I know you're aiming somewhere, but just want to add those thoughts to the conversation.
That's one of my favorite thoughts. And if you notice, the most recurrent word in my work is freedom. Mm-hmm. Or liberty, depending on the translation to English. But freedom, since I work with the concept of God, is the word that I can relate most to the nature of God. It's infinite freedom, unlimited freedom. And that's something that we cannot comprehend, or we cannot actually deal with it. We cannot handle. That's why our lives are frequently a mess. We cannot handle our own freedom. That's why we hate so much, and we have so much problem with other people, because we cannot handle their freedom. And that's also because that's also why we have a great difficulty with God itself, because you say, oh no, come on, I would have made the word better. Sorry, yes. But there are some mistakes you did that are just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. You let things go loose without the necessary control that I would impose to reality.
Sure.
Because I know what is better. So
I have found myself like in some very difficult moments saying, God, where are you?
Yeah. Why so silent? Why so absent? Why so liberal? Why don't you interfere in this mess, in this injustice, in all this suffering, and let us experience for ourselves what we created, the world we created. We are here right now creating an experience. All of us that are engaged in this talk. And there are around the universe infinite other beings creating other experiences as they like. Mm-hmm. And the sum of billions of experience is what we call Earth in the current stage of mentality, of consciousness. So many of these experiences are very positive and wonderful and precious and sacred and a miracle. And many of these experiences are horrible and extremely sad and extremely painful. Maybe most of experiences are somewhere in between. They're not so great, not so bad. They are kind of bland. They have no taste. They're just rolling the stone of time uphill, like the myth of Sisyphus rolling this big rock uphill, which is pointless. But this is what we think about our lives. Like many small vices, many small hobbies or ways we invent to lose time, to spend our time, which is precious, which is at the end of the day our life. Time is our life. It's the way we invest our freedom. So it is essential that we understand that God, being so liberal and wanting so much and praising so much our own effort and our own choices, let us do whatever we want so we can taste the good and the bad. And in vast amounts of time. That's the problem. Another big problem that we have, that we try to narrow it down to one day. Now, this is wrong. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't do that. The world shouldn't be the way it is. Mm-hmm. But when you put 1,000,000 years, maybe we kind of lose perspective already. But when you put 1,000,000 years in the evolution of society, well, there's a lot of experience. And there's a lot of good and bad experiences that will sum up to a degree of maturity of consciousness, in which we will look to our sides and will recognize only very mature spirits. And we will praise God. Well, thank you for being so patient and let us do everything wrong we could do and we could conceive, so that in the end we could have a taste of bad choices and hate them, not because you forced us, but because we tasted it in our tongues, or better, in our hearts, in our souls. Now we strongly refuse the bad, because we know exactly how it feels. We know exactly each small consequence of being horrible persons, of being lazy persons, of being indifferent,
Mm-hmm.
of being uninterested in anything. I don't care. I prefer not to be involved in anything. I want to have pleasure. I want to enjoy. I want to entertain myself with nullities on Netflix or so, on YouTube. Now, that's okay. And actually, God permitted that we did worse things in the past. We had atomic bombs on cities. We had the Holocaust. We had Inquisition. We had massacres of millions of people in big wars. All of this happened, and more and more, as these experiences are more and more distant from us now, we see that the world is improving somehow. We are evolving. There is progress, but it is so slow that we cannot notice most of the time. And we are also a bit immature. Our psychology is a bit infantile still. So we want transformation very quickly. And God is extremely wise and extremely patient, not to force the hand against our will, because then we would hate God
Yeah.
with reason. Because God does not do that, then we hate God sometimes without reason. That's only our fault, because we created the situations we are in, and then we blame God for the situations we created ourselves.
Yes. It's interesting. That takes my mind to question 1009 of the Spirit's book, if I'm not mistaken, where is the answer by St. Paul, where he talks about precisely life being such a way that it gets to a point that we start to dislike the deformities that we cause in our own selves, and that dislike that actually is like, okay, what's out there for me, what's next. So I kind of make the connection with the answer, which is a brilliant answer by Paul in the Spirit's book, at the fourth part of the Spirit's book. And I think we have, you know, I don't think I have ever thought of God as being this liberal being. I'm thinking that the topic of my next lecture would be God the Liberal. And people are going to come because they're going to be curious about, am I talking about politics, the politics of God, but this God that is, that enhances and expands and the concept of freedom, as you have been talking about. Now, when we think about day to day, right? Does it connecting or the closeness to the idea or the sentiment, the feelings of God present make a difference in our daily lives? And how so? And then how, so those are two questions, but I think a question before that is also how do we recognize God in our day-to-day. And I want to share with all of you who are here, and you may be acquainted to this story. It is a story by Joanna de Angelis in the book Surrender to God. And is one of the first chapters. It's called The Blessing of God. And it is a city man who is going through the country and see this man laboring on the field. And he does not believe in God, the city guy. And he asked the worker, "Do you believe in God?" And the worker said, "Yes, I do. She describes that it's a magnificent day, and the countryside was absolutely beautiful, and the light of the sun and on the leaves and everything was just magnificent." So the worker says, "Yes, I do." And then the man says to him, "Then, in this beautiful morning, are you able to show me one place where God could possibly be?" And the man humbly looks around, he pauses what he's doing, he leans on the handle of the hoe, and then he replies, "Mister, I cannot show one place where God is in this enlightened morning. However, I ask you to show me just one place where God is not." So this is one of my favorite stories about God because I think it portrays well having eyes to see, having the openness to understand the manifestation. In one of your lectures, you talk about the cause. So you talk about this. I have an iPad here, and if I push it, it will move. There's an external cause to that movement. However, the iPad will not move on its own. Now, if there is an intelligent cause within, which is us, our physical body moves because there is a cause that's not necessarily something external, although if someone pushes me, I will move, I will stumble. So there's external causes, but there's also internal causes. There is an internal force that gives life to matter and make us move. So you play with this concept of different causes. And the reason why I'm bringing it here is because for me personally, it helps me to connect with God when I connect with this cause that lives within me. That is the very reason why I am alive and breathing. And it is the same force. I talk about this in a lecture that I did recently. I have a yard, and in the yard, I created a path for rocks. And so I clean the ground, and then we put a layer of some fabric, and then we put the rocks on top of that, and then a layer of glue, because tiny little rocks, so the rocks wouldn't move. And then every weekend, I go out there, and I see the weed coming through all these layers. And I say to myself, from time to time when I'm annoyed, what force is that makes this weed comes through all these barriers and find its way out? And then I make peace with myself when I say, this force that I'm witnessing nature is in me because I am nature. And that is the way that I like to connect with the presence of God within me. So Joanna's story talks about two different men with two very different abilities to perceive. And then this is my story where I kind of make the connection how it works for me. And that takes us to the question again, do we need God in our lives? and how having God in our life makes a difference.
Wow, that's a good point, because I never want people to have the impression that philosophy is such an abstract thing, as an abstract discussion that we cannot profit from and that we cannot apply in our lives. And that's why I started with metaphysical ideas, super abstract ideas that are totally present in our lives, such as freedom, justice, peace, equality. So we pursue these things, and we can hardly conceive our lives without these references. And nevertheless, they do not exist. They're not no physical beings. They have no existence. They are ideals. They are projections of the best parts of us to the world. The world as we want it, not as it is already. And through this reference, we guide ourselves in life. We move in life. Now, when I started to study the concept of God, one of my professors said, well, why not study something that you can actually understand and something that you can actually study? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, because it's the best that we have. It's the best concept that we have. So if we don't address this big concept, this main central concept, we cannot enlighten the other concepts. And the more we think about God, in my perspective at least, I think, the more we enlighten all the other supreme values of life. We have more respect even for the words. Love has another weight. Freedom has another weight. Learning, wisdom, they are elevated by the idea of God. And that's really what I wanted to happen with anyone who hears about the concept of God. That people feel elevated, that people have strength to overcome the state of being, the state of consciousness that they have now. And in your example, especially in the example about beauty everywhere, about the presence of God being such an omnipresent beauty, order, justice, wisdom, intelligence, that we can hardly see one process without it. I think that's the main point. And I cross the word, one of the many words I would like to address, to use to address God, is beauty. God is also the beauty in things. Because from a materialistic perspective or an evolutionary perspective in biology, there's no point of having beautiful things. They're not useful. They do not. So it is sometimes a spare of a waste of time and energy to make a being more beautiful, because it does not contribute to the survival many times, most of the time. And even more, why should inanimate things that are not subject to evolutionary biology be beautiful? Like a waterfall, like the stars and the sun and the moon. They're only gases and rocks and liquids. They shouldn't be beautiful. There's no point in, and they are not only beautiful, they are astonishing. They're awe-inspiring. You can spend a day looking to a waterfall, and you will post it as the main thing that you did in that year, and you will remember that moment because a bunch of molecules of water, which is pretty common, are falling. So if you think about that materialistically, that makes no sense. But something in us elevates these experiences and characterize these experiences as supremely beautiful. And there is a passage by Saint Augustine, the living one, not the spirit in the Spirit's book. Saint Augustine said, well, if you dislike anything, there is a sickness in your heart. Because any mentality, person, object, bug, any process and any being in life that you hate, that you despise, God create. And when God created it, it was loved by God. Now, the point is, in our narrow perspective, what is not useful to us is sometimes ugly or bad. These are the words we use to characterize things that disgust us. But that's profoundly personal, because everything is arranged according to another order that is not dependent on our taste or our preferences. And obviously, we have the right and even the power to change nature here and there, but we have to do that wisely and not out of spoiled, childish mentality of doing, fulfilling every desire that we may have. Now, the best people that we ever met on the planet, they would see everything as beautiful all the time. And that is the bliss and the happiness of their lives. So sometimes because we have the notion of God as an entity, we negotiate with God. Are you seeing what I'm suffering now? Can you please send some sort of remedy or some cookie so I'm not so sad?
Right.
And we negotiate with God and expect reward. But well, Jesus, for example, did a lot, and he did not receive much reward in this materialistic sense. On the contrary, he has a very difficult life that ended kind of in misery and supreme injustice. And nevertheless, he didn't stop seeing beauty, truth, good, and justice in everything. At the final moments, he tried to negotiate with God, not in the bad sense, but he asked one thing to God, and God said no to Jesus. Father, if it is possible, let me refuse this cup, this chalice. And it didn't change what he had to do. And ultimately, he did it. I don't want to use a futile word, but I think he accomplished his mission joyfully, in a sense, with a sense of total dignity and with the satisfaction of accomplishing his duty. And we see other enlightened beings and spiritual masters. Again, Teresa of Avila in Spain, and Gandhi, and Francis of Assisi, and Clara, which is underrated. Most of the times she is understood as a follower of Francis of Assisi, but if you carefully analyze her story, you see that she's quite remarkable. One of the most remarkable saints in history. And if you analyze all these lives, you see that these people are ecstatic of joy most of the time, even in the face of adversity. Now, I think that's the prize, that's the big reward, that's what we should strive for, that's what we should desire, that our souls are so purified, so cleaned, that it purifies our eyes so we can see beauty everywhere and be elevated most of the time.
Wow, that's like, I feel I feel moved by your words, and I feel like a desire to expand the concept of beauty in my life and in my eyes. I think that Spiritism has given me that to the extent that I'm able to. So whatever comes into my life, I can see and I can surrender to a higher purpose in everything. So I might be sad, I might be tired, but I'm never hopeless. I'm never lost in the sense of like not knowing how things are going to end, because I may not know at the present moment, but I have the vision of the future. Now, associate the idea of God in me and the ability to see beauty in everything is quite challenging, but it feels like such a good challenge. It feels like I can do this. I'll take the challenge. I'll do the exercise, you know, and so I think that's it answers very beautifully the question that we posed in the beginning: does God matter, right? And how is that? How can we connect with God? How can we see God? And where is God? And how having God in our lives make a difference? I want to take these final minutes just to open here and see if anyone has a question or a comment that would like to add at this time. Everybody reflecting.
I was listening. Thank you very much for your talk.
Can you hear him?
Yes.
Let's speak up.
Thank you very much for your talk, and like Suzana said, it has opened my mind, even if it were a couple of inches. One of the things that stood out when you guys said liberal, God is liberal, I think that a better word would be tolerant. Because God tolerates everything. It's not like he's liberal in the sense of, okay, go and do whatever you want. No, people they're making their own decisions with their free will, and God tolerates that because he knows it's for their own evolution. So I think that tolerant would be a better word. And also the thing about when you said about there's no purpose in beauty in nature, I disagree, because everything which is beautiful in nature is to attract, in the opposite sex in order to procreate and continue the species. And the other thing about the waterfall is, you said, oh, it's just water falling. Yes, but why is it beautiful? Because it's a work of God. So you look at it and you see all the details in the rocks. You see the different levels of water falling. And you appreciate that as beautiful, and you realize that this is God.
Yeah. Great points. Well, in metaphysics, we are always like testing the words and see to which extent they actually apply to what we are trying to say. Because, of course, no word is adequate to describe God or the characteristics of God. So we have to test the words according to our mentality and to our limitations, okay? So, but the many philosophers that use the word liberal, they use the word in the sense, more or less, what you just meant, in the sense of patient and open-minded, so to say, very open-minded, and in the sense of accepting our choices, not that would be very dangerous, not in the sense of indifference, like God would not care about what we decide or what you do. That would be not love and would be unwise, and that would make God a being or a condition or whatever God is that we could hardly love too. We could hardly love God back if we did not recognize this relationship. That's why in the Bible we have some beautiful metaphors, which are still metaphors also, of, for example, seeing God face to face. What is to see God face to face? Well, God has no face. And I'm quite sure that Jesus and Paul know that, that God doesn't have a face. But nevertheless, these metaphors are good to some extent, to a certain degree, so to say, because they push our minds forward, they enlarge our imagination, our sense of conceptions that are or not valid to address the subject. But about beauty, beauty has some evolutionary biological purposes, but these are completely irrelevant when you are looking cross species. For example, why should flowers be beautiful to us and so amazingly, astonishingly beautiful? We lack a proper biological explanation. Why birds are beautiful for human beings? Why golden fish are so beautiful to us? Why the trees are so beautiful? Well, in my opinion, everything is very beautiful. I can hardly see something that is really ugly. And more interesting, I have a workshop only on the concept of beauty. And interestingly, I show some objects that are beautiful, then some organic things like flowers and birds, and then I show people, and I show first beautiful people, like beautiful appearance, like models or great actors, for example. And after that, I describe why they are beautiful, because there is symmetry and there is cognitive appeal in symmetry and so on and so on. And then I show people who are ugly of appearance from the perspective of appearance, such as, for example, Chico Xavier or Mother Teresa of Calcutta, or Gandhi. They're not beautiful in their appearance, their physical appearance. But interesting, when I ask people, are these people beautiful? They usually answer, yes, they are very beautiful people. Now, you see that the sense of beauty completely transcends physical or even biological perspectives. And it goes beyond the physical form to the character, to the soul, to the intentions, to the sentiments. And we, in daily life, we usually refer to extraordinary people as beautiful. Or we say, this guy has a beautiful mind. What does it actually mean? You cannot see it. Or this person has a wonderful heart. She has the most beautiful heart I ever seen. Actually, you didn't see any heart because it's something you cannot see. You're just inferring from emotions and behavior and so, and ideas and moods, what this person should be inside in their soul. So that's a very short answer for very complicated, very complex questions that we should address in a new talk, maybe.
Yes, we'll leave it open. David, you had a question or no?
No, I'd like to thank you so much for a very stimulating talk. I came from, as an atheist until I found spiritism, and I still feel today that I'm still a bit of an atheist in some ways, because the way God is presented really is contradictory. But I think today you opened my mind a little bit to understand more about the concept. And a lot of the words that you mentioned today, this idea of liberty, is truly amazing. It really resonates with me. So thank you again for your amazing talk.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I will catch up with you afterwards. But for now, we really appreciate it. It was amazing. And I look forward to having a conversation with you again here at Conscious, but certainly in person.
Yeah. Would be amazing. So
with a lot of coffee, because I need to keep my brain like going.
I'm from Minas Gerais, so
yes.
coffee is always
coffee and cheese bread. We'll do it. Okay. All right. Thank you, Humberto. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate you. All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm telling you, in order to prepare for this, I watched 3 of his lectures, took notes, wrote, organized my mind, because he is quite of a brilliant mind.
But he speaks so clearly.
Yes, he speaks very clearly. He can bring, and you have to set your own mind in a different, because when he's talking about beauty, he's talking from a completely different perspective. So it's not how we are defining here. So you have to be able, you have to do a lot of abstraction to kind of follow him on his thinking. But his contribution, he has a lot of research, a lot of books, some of them in English. There's one that he has a chapter, is a book. Oh, I think I have here. Let me see. Oh, hold on. Oh, here. So he has one chapter in Science of Laughing that, your God, my God. This is from the Spiritist Council, and it's not his book. He has a chapter in it, and then his genealogy, in English, genealogy of the spirit. So a lot of philosophy. So that's one of the books that has important, but he has many other books and books about God. And so it's, but it's, I enjoy very much. I really felt like my own mind was like, if I could, yeah. So, all right, great. Let's move on to